Thanks for being coaches, and hopefully I can help you out here and help you understand the role a little bit better if you don't know about it already. And we have a lot of background. We've been doing coaches in Design Studio for 8 years that we've had coaches on teams. So, yeah, so quite a while. Did we have coaches when you were a student?
Yep. I think it might have been from the 5th year MBAs.
Oh, yes. So that was the model that we originally had. When we first started with Design Studio years ago, they used to have grad students, and the grad students would be kind of this layer of management and manage multiple projects. And so then we switched to Agile, and we had a few grad students yet. One of the issues with the grad students is it was a little bit unpredictable. You couldn't say if you're going to have 5 or if you're going to have 2 or if you're going to have 8. And so it was like, okay, well, we had to bring in, some years we had to bring in a 5th year student or something like that that would help us out as a pseudo grad student. And so when we switched to Agile, then we had them do kind of the coaches for Agile in general. That we called them an Agile coach, but they didn't know any Agile any better than any of the rest of us. So it wasn't really that great of a deal. And we've quickly realized too that it wasn't the main focus of what we were trying to accomplish in Design Studio. We were more focused on the undergraduate education. So the time that it was taking us faculty to teach the grad students was kind of digging into how much we wanted to do for the undergraduate students. So we got rid of the grad students to make it easier for us. Well, that lasted for about a year, and we realized, okay, well, there's only a couple of faculty members. How are we going to keep track of all these teams? So we don't get a lot of face time with the teams. So the teams are kind of just all on their own. And they wouldn't come to us with questions necessarily because, you know, we were grading them and they didn't want to have a bad grade, or they were, maybe they couldn't go to the sponsor because the sponsor might have been part of the issue, or they're having trouble working with the sponsor, or they didn't want to look like they didn't know what they were doing. So we created what we called coaches, project coaches, then that next year, where we brought in some industry professionals and they hung out with the team a little bit more regular basis, and they were an independent advocate for them, so they didn't have a stake in the sponsor, projects. They didn't working for the sponsor, and they didn't have a stake in the grading because they weren't faculty. They were just a volunteer coach. So it was kind of just an advocate for the team that could give them advice, or that the team could go to if they had questions, and just have a little more face time with the teams, kind of like an adult, kind of just a little more adult face time with teams. A mentor, a professional mentor. And so that was worked out pretty good. And so we've been doing it for the last 7 years. And we've refined it to some extent over time, really understanding what the goals are for the coach. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'll go through kind of a little introduction of what we're going to cover, and then just a little bit on our processes, some of the guidelines for coaches, or some of the tips and tricks, and then just kind of have a little bit of a conversation and see if you guys had questions or thoughts on that, and then give you some information on visiting campus, and finally the last date. So this could be informal. Obviously, you can ask me any questions along the way, and I can help you out. We have, as I mentioned in the last session, we have 11 coaches.
You double tapped at some point your slide ahead up there.
Did it just?
You guys are coaches up there. We're just.
Yeah, there you go.
Your other slide just before this, we could
Yeah.
really see, but that's okay.
We were just getting a glimpse ahead.
Yeah, that's
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, there's your coaches.
yeah.
All right. I have 11 coaches committed at this point. I have probably another 5 of them that I know are going to come on. I just haven't had the time to, kind of finalize those. And our goal is to get up to 25, so we'll have one per team. If we don't get up to 25, which I still got a couple weeks to do that, if I don't get up to 25, then we might try doing a coach pool thing. I'm not sure if we're going to do that or not. I'm hoping that we'll find the coaches, and I think we can. I think there's several others that just haven't responded yet, or and I've yet to ask some yet too. So we should be in good shape, but we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping to not need a pool.
Local specific to Lincoln, or do you mind them in Omaha?
I don't mind them in Omaha. It's a little bit difficult sometimes for that to work. In Design Studio this last year, we've had a coach or two. I think this year we have 2 coaches that are from Omaha, but we've had coach or 2 in the past that is from Omaha. And sometimes they lose that connectivity with the team. It's a little harder for them to get on site and stay in touch.
A lot of the names that I might be able to go ahead and go pass on as possibles are more associated with them.
Yeah. So the preference is Lincoln. We'll use an Omaha coach occasionally. I think we had a couple last year in senior design as well. But we got some great coaches already. And a couple of them ended up not being able to make it. The Department of Transportation must have had an issue happen this morning or something where they had to deal with that fire first, I guess, and then hopefully not literally a fire, but it might. Department of Transportation has to deal with a lot of things. So Luann, Daughtry, and Lehman were going to be here today, and they just ended up not being able to make it because of an issue at work. So that's where we're at. So we have Brendan, Jeff, and Mark here today. So thanks for coming. We haven't done assignments yet for the projects. We'll do that. Hopefully even preference-based. We'll give you a chance to submit your preferences for the projects, give you a short description of each of them, and then you'll be able to say, I'd really like to help out with Nebraska book because that's an interesting, I have some expertise in that area or whatever it might be. We'll also need to get your bio from you as part of the application process, I guess, maybe LinkedIn link or something. Yeah. And that way we can share that with this potential sponsor and make sure there's no conflicts of interest. That's something that we do is we deconflict any potential problems there, make sure that you're not working at Emeritus and coaching a surety or something, that's, we don't have either of those projects, but you know what I'm saying, so.
I've put my ties to Huawei, so that's helped out a lot.
Yeah, that's probably good. Universities have had to do that quite a bit. All right. So if you do know of other coaches, let us know. We can certainly use a few more. And I know I've asked a number of people from Don't Panic Labs. They're always great about providing coaches. They've done quite a bit in the past.
No takers other than me?
Not yet. I can probably push it a little bit more. Maybe they're a little timid.
Yeah, go for it. Got Santi. He came back, right? Did he do last year?
Yeah, he's coming back. He did last year, yep. And he's been great. He's opened doors now. When I heard Nick moved over there too.
Yep.
So maybe get him to coach. I think he was a coach in the past, if I remember. So yeah, what we're trying to do is give you kind of an introduction of the coach role, tips and tricks, and let you have some conversation amongst yourselves. But you guys would be all new coaches, so unfortunately you can't get any insights from last year's coaches. A good number of those that I listed there were last year's. Justin and Paul and Luann were all coaches last year on that list, as was Shane and Taryn and Santi. So yeah, so half of the list that we have so far were coaches last year. All right, that's what we're going to cover. So a little bit, if you didn't catch it in the last session on senior design, I'll give a little bit more specific information about kind of where the people fit in the structure. And it's probably very difficult to read, but we're bringing in a new chair in computer science and engineering. Her name is Marilyn Wolf, and she's going to be kind of over the department and the faculty of the department. All of our tribe leads are faculty members. So Dr. Bone, so Chris, Shruti, Jeff, and Brady are our tribe leads. Those are the 4 tribe leads that we have this year. Brady and Chris did it last year, as tribe leads, and then Shruti and Jeff are new this year. They are all faculty members. They have classes beyond senior design as well, so they teach, some software engineering class or some computer science and engineering class as well. And then Christy is the director of senior design, and technically then Kyle and Bill and Melanie and I kind of report to her as the senior design sub-organization. Technically Kyle works for the computer admins group, and then I kind of work for Rake's school and for CSE. So it's a little bit, it's not specifically how it works, but that's kind of our relationships. And then Bill and Melanie and I are going to be the project managers. Christy can fill in if we need additional ones. She'll take on a team or two, and then Kyle does a lot of the technical pieces. So that's kind of who we are, and how everything kind of fits together. It's a little bit different view of the squad. There is the squad, the student members, and then we have the student leads, the product manager and the development manager. That's kind of the top half of that circle. That is the student piece. So you'll see the tribe lead over there on the right-hand side. They're going to be working with and advising the team as a whole, not so much necessarily the leads, and then assigning grades as well. Whereas the project managers, my role, Melanie, Bill, we'll be working more with the leads, specifically making sure things are moving along, that the projects are being run appropriately, getting them the advice and tools that they need to do that, and kind of monitoring those things. Then we have the coach, which is your role. They're just going to be, you're coming in and trying to build that trusting relationship with the team, mostly. Maybe the leads a little bit more than the rest of the team, but everybody on the team. You build that trusting relationship, and then you can provide kind of advice and guidance on the project along the way. And I like to think of it as you guys have years of experience. You can look at something and see something coming that the team can't. So the team's moving along and they're just paying attention to where they're at, and they don't really think about it, but you can see, they're going to run into this problem here in about 3 weeks. They don't even see it coming. You can kind of prompt them and get them to do it. You don't have to say, change or do this. You're not really directing them, but you're guiding them along the way through mentorship, asking them questions, making them think about different things to help them along the way. The sponsor is there too, and the sponsor obviously has a vested interest in it and trying to get their vision executed. And they have several points of contact. The primary one is the product owner, and they're talking about what that role is in that session over there. But they'll have other technical resources. They'll have an executive sponsor, I like to say, is the one that's writing the checks. They're the ones that are vested, but not the day-to-day person, highly interested in the success of the project. And they might have users and other things too. You'll probably interact with the sponsors. You'll see them at the meetings. If you go to the team, to the sponsor meetings, the client meetings, you'll interact with them. So they'll get used to you being around, but you might not have all that much direct relationship building with the sponsor.
So quick question. Since I'm
Yes.
talking about this. A lot of life cycle, of course, is maintenance, post delivery of
Right.
a particular product, et cetera. Is the maintenance the responsibility of the sponsor and the sponsor's organization?
Generally so, yes. There are very few cases. So your question is if the maintenance is part of the sponsor's responsibility. There's very few cases, especially in senior design, where they would get to a point where they're doing any kind of maintenance activities.
Okay, so you're not picking up an old project from last year?
No.
Doing maintenance as the project?
No, we've done a few projects that are continuation projects. We'll call them continuation projects, but it's new functionality that we're developing onto that system.
Okay.
So for example, one of our sponsors this year this will be their 4th year of doing the sponsorship with Nebraska Environmental Trust, and they were creating a grant management system. Well, the grant management system, the first year they did the application process. The second year they did the review process. The third year they did
They have a high-level architecture and they're executing.
right. So they're doing the reconciliation process. This year, I'm not sure what they're doing, but this is the kind of theoretically the last time, but they'll kind of wrap everything up. But it's always new pieces of functionality. Occasionally in Design Studio, we'll get a project that'll, it'll start being in production, maybe in February timeframe, and they'll do some maintenance activities on it, but not a ton.
The artifacts that you need to go ahead and deliver to the sponsor?
A lot of those are up to the sponsor themselves. So if they're looking
They
for
adapt
specific,
to it and stuff
yeah.
like that.
So, if they're not a very technical organization, maybe one of the things that the team might do, or senior design as a whole might do, is work with them to put them in partnership with somebody that can be a technical resource. We'll put them in contact with Don't Panic Labs, and Don't Panic Labs will start interacting with them and picking up and understanding the project, so that way that when it does go live, they can enhance it or maintain it to some extent. There's been a few projects like that. We've partnered with different organizations around town to do those things, or in Omaha as well. And if they have technical resources at the sponsoring organization, then some of the deliverables or artifacts might be training materials, or having them as part of the process of the code reviews, those types of things in the spring semester, to make sure that the technical resources there are coming up to speed with the solution.
Documentation, test cases.
Yep.
Obviously code, et cetera.
Yeah.
All
And they get the whole repository, and includes all of the issues. All of that is dumped, and so they can understand future things that could be done on the system. They're given a list of those things. That's the parking lot. There's some standard documentation that we do across all the projects, but some projects have some unique pieces that they'll add to it. Yeah. So how we work together, I don't know. This is a newer slide. This kind of talks about each of the roles that are in there and some of the interactions between them. A lot of times the coach, which I don't even know is on this slide. Oh yeah, there it is, in part of the team. The coach is there to give you kind of some mentorship, and you're working with the team primarily to understand what they're doing and keep on, kind of keep pace of what they're doing. But there's a lot of people that are helping the team out, and I talked about it. Mostly the roles I talked about in the other room were those support roles. We try to give enough support to the team that they can't fail. I mean, there's still going to be some issues, and some things can't be overcome, but we give them enough support to help them succeed as much as possible. And so this is probably the best teed up projects they're going to get in their careers. They're coming in and they gotta they've got it kind of right sized already by the time it starts, and they get a team, and we know the structure, and we have defined roles and responsibilities, and so they kind of can just ease into that reality of what is working on a project, and they can deal with more of the unexpected pieces, or dealing with expectations and trying to understand those things without having to worry about all the structure and pieces that go around that.
Who's the main role that would kind of do scoping and kind of estimating of a project?
The product manager and the product owner would work together for that. So the product owner is on the sponsor side. The product owner is on the sponsor side, somebody that works for the sponsor. The product manager is kind of the student version of that on the team. Mm-hmm. So generally that product manager is the one that's going to help with the scoping of it, understand what the features are, doing a lot of the high level estimates. We try to do as much team estimation as possible, but that's not always the case. So they're mainly the ones from a student standpoint that are going to do it, working in conjunction with the product owner from the sponsor side to do that.
I feel like kind of the biggest thing I brought to the team I worked with was kind of knowing how long something typically takes, and them being kind of overly optimistic. So I'm like, you're going to hit issues along the way. It's not going to be smooth sailing. And I was like,
right.
I had to take
and it isn't going to be a vacuum either. So I said it's the product manager that's primarily responsible, but they have to work with the development manager to understand what the risks are from the architecture standpoint, or if there's things that are unknown there that'll impact their ability to accomplish something. Like I said, they try to do team estimating as much as possible, so you do planning poker, some of the agile methodologies there, and work together in prioritization. So even though the product owner or the product manager says this is the most valuable feature, it isn't necessarily the first thing they do if there's an architectural risk that has to be addressed first. So that it takes both the development manager and the product manager to make sure that things are prioritized appropriately.
How firm are you on a specific agile methodology? Obviously, I'm familiar with half a dozen methodologies, but I'd like to make sure that I'm using the one that you guys want to go ahead and...
There's some critical practices. That we kind of do, but we don't force a lot of it on them. I used to, and we're going to change the way we teach the class a little bit this year, but we used to do it more as kind of a training wheels thing. So we say, okay, here's what the practice is, here's why you would use it, here's kind of the training wheels version of it, and then you start to try to pick it up and stuff. We try to promote, a lot of practices. There's like 8 or so that we kind of do a little bit more promotion of, but there's a few that are critical. We have them do retrospectives. That's one that we will enforce, because this is a learning environment, and that's a big piece of the learning opportunities. Story mapping is another one that we'll end up enforcing, and that's mostly just to keep the big picture part of it, because a lot of people will lose it, and it's a lot of that's the communication piece, and then also how it kind of estimates and plays out, and release planning kind of comes off of that. So that's a behavior that we'll grade them on, is how well they do that. Estimating is one that we'll have to make sure that they'll do estimating. Now, how they do it, if they use an agile methodology or if they just have one person do the estimates, that's good or bad, and we can teach them along the way on that, but they do need to do some estimating. So there's like 4 or 5 that we have them do for sure. We don't force them to do pair programming, or we don't force them to do TDD. There's benefits to those things, and we try to make sure that they understand those benefits and teach them how they could do it better. If they're running into issues, and talk to them about it. That's a big job of the project manager and some of the tribe leads' responsibility.
A lot of my background is requirements gathering, definition, et cetera,
Yeah.
and also testing to requirements as the acceptance.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So,
So in my mind, and what we try to teach the students too, is the acceptance criteria are the requirements in an agile environment. If you write good acceptance criteria, you're basically writing the requirements for that feature.
right.
Yeah. And that's how they should do it. Did they get that far? We can certainly tell them when they're not doing it well.
Yeah.
And what they should be thinking about. And it worked well. So we had a project last year that I was working with quite a bit, and there's some really good students on it. We're doing work for the Math Day. It's an event here, and they're trying to do organization of the event, which includes scheduling out volunteers and signing volunteers up and all this, piece about volunteers. And the sponsor tended to change her mind every time they showed her something. They'd say, oh, well, what about this? Or what about this? Or how about this? Or I'd like to see it this way. And so I tried to coach them and say, okay, well, if you really want to avoid that or be able to handle it better, you need to put in the acceptance criteria. It's covering your butt. You got to make sure that, whatever it is, you say, here's the acceptance criteria, and then she can go through those steps. And then if she doesn't like anything, then you can talk about, okay, well, if you want that, then we have to take these other things away. And because they were getting behind, because the scope kept blowing up every time they'd show her something. They'd show, well, what about this and what about this? So there's tools to help them, and we can see them along the way that things are either going right or not, and what a better way for them to approach it. Now, whether they do that or not, and especially from your point of view, you guys are a coach, you have no authority over them. They don't have to take your advice. You probably give them some really good advice, but they don't have to take it. So they'll say, oh yeah, that's nice, that sounds good, and then just ignore you. And there's not a ton you can do about it. You can probably express your concern to the project manager or the tribe lead or something. Maybe try to come at it from a different direction. But they don't really have to take your advice. So that's kind of where you try to build that trusting relationship. And I was talking with a former coach before, and he was saying one of the things that he had to do at the beginning of his relationship with these teams was to prove his value, essentially. And he did it because he was technical. He would say he'd have to do something, real technical for them and show that he could, that he was worth him being there, show that he could do it. And then they would be like, oh yeah, that's cool, I can do, maybe I'll ask you for other things, and so kind of show his value that way by proving himself technically. There's other ways to prove yourself too, but that's something you have to think about. Is like, is the team going to take any of your advice if they don't think you are adding any value to the project? So try to figure out ways to indicate your value to the team.
Along those lines, since I'm not in a company or the university at the moment, and a lot of the tools that you're going to be using are going to probably be based out of UNL, is there any way for me to be able to get access to like GitHub, to the AWS
Yeah.
accounts, etc.?
We can add you to the GitHub in the box.
Yeah, because I've got to go ahead and get familiar enough with Git, etc. Right?
Right.
I've used a lot of configuration management stuff. Is Git going to be your primary document repository also?
We use Box for documents. Okay. Box is like Dropbox, only it's the university standard. It's just a different version of Dropbox.
Okay, so it does versioning and tracking.
Yep.
Does it do checkout?
You can lock and unlock them and stuff, but
Slack I got to get back to because my previous employer was using WebEx.
Oh.
My previous employer was the creator of WebEx, so
yeah,
we had to go eat our own cooking.
Yeah.
But I'll get back to the Slack again too.
Yeah, they're the tools. We use private Slack channels and private Box folders and private GitHub repositories just to keep it, and then we add access as needed for the sponsor, for the coach, obviously for the teams, and for the staff and faculty.
Currently, I'm just maintaining a Gmail is my primary.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. You'll just need to you'll have to have a GitHub ID, and then we can add you to the appropriate accounts. Yeah. I talked a little bit about this already, why we have coaches. We wanted to make sure that, the teams had kind of a little bit more experience, some experienced eyes looking at how they were doing. Sometimes, it's just another adult in the room type of thing. And the teams are great, so they're very bright students, a lot of very sharp students, but they just needed help putting things in context or just viewing it from somebody with the experienced eyes. And then, the unbiased piece, they were kind of not coming to us because we graded them, and they weren't coming to the sponsor because they didn't want to look like they didn't know what they were doing. So that's why it is. So you guys are that industry partner. You're a volunteer from the industry to provide mentorship, a resource that doesn't have anything to do with the grade or the project. And so you can be unbiased, and you can build that relationship and support kind of the team's education along the way. So here's how you kind of get started as a coach, or some of the goals that we have for the coach. First and foremost is building that trust and relationship with the team members. So it takes a little bit more effort up front to, kind of get that relationship going, so that you can be clued in. I mean, if they don't see you for the first few weeks or first month, then they're certainly not going to remember to include you in their emails or copy you on the meeting request or whatever it might be. You have to kind of get in that and start that relationship. But that's good. You can help the team form as a group. You can help them understand things that they don't know about or things they haven't experienced yet. And then you can even contribute, sometimes, as a more technical resource, you could code review some of their stuff if it's in the right language, or you can provide guidance on their architecture, or if you're a requirements person, you can give them feedback on their story map and make sure that they're not missing anything, and provide ways that you can contribute. And if needed, you can help get them the help that they need to work. So you don't necessarily have to solve every problem. You can come to us, you can come to other coaches, you can find out somebody that can help them. So if you're not as technical and they're struggling with something, find somebody that can help them technically.
Is there any paperwork associated with the students that will get provided over?
How so?
Something like a resume. I mean, if I was getting a new employee, I would generally grab resume and transcripts.
Yeah.
Transcripts obviously are probably not going to be.
No, we probably won't share transcripts with you, but the resumes, you can request that from the students. When you meet them and say, hey, share your resume, I can take a look at it for you, even give you some feedback on it, and then at the same time find out, what they're doing. These students in senior design in particular, that they're at the stage of their career where they need this experience. Some of them haven't done internships, and so they need something kind of right as their experience, and they need help getting a job. Some of them are foreign or non, English as a second language students, and they need somebody to help them, mentor them. Help them beyond just the project. You can help them as an individual. You don't have to limit it to the project if you really want to get to know them. So here's some of the thoughts on getting started as a coach. Yeah, okay, good. One thing is the meetings. You can interpret the meetings to help them catch things that they might not catch. Something seemingly small that the sponsor says, they won't pick up on, but you'll they said this 5 times. None of you wrote it down, and they really mean this. So you've had that experience. You've been in meetings where kind of the unsaid things that could cause problems down the road if they don't understand it. You can help them get kind of in that meeting rhythm. Remind them of their practices that they've learned. The tools that they know. They're seniors in computer science and engineering, or juniors in software engineering, and they've learned a lot of these practices. So if they're not doing a good job with acceptance criteria, you remind them, you're not going to get very far if you don't have good acceptance criteria, or this is how you can solve that problem. Communicate with them. Make sure you're putting your expectations in there as well. So if this will help them along the way and help them understand how it works. But if you email them and say, okay, well, I expect to see a response by Monday on this, or I need to know here in the next 2 weeks, and kind of put those expectations literally in the email so that they're not second guessing or anything, and just kind of encourage them to do the same on theirs, making sure you're putting in expectations, keeping the expectations clear for them on what you expect. Let them know it's okay to make mistakes, just as long as they're learning from them and moving forward, keep things moving forward. Help them. I heard this from another coach too. This doesn't, a lot of times you build that trusting relationship and you kind of back off, and it's not near as many hours working with them. You just come in half hour, 45 minutes, and keep kind of up to speed pretty quick. One coach was mentioning too, though, that you get towards the end of the year and making sure that the system is delivered appropriately, is just as much work, and they're not very good at that yet. So that's, there's things even throughout the whole year that you can help them with that they just aren't very good at yet, all the way down to delivery of the system. So I have a foster environment of getting the code working. So a lot of times they'll just say it's working locally, or it works on my machine. It doesn't. Yeah. That's not the point. You get into these release meetings, our point is that this is something that the sponsor can use without their intervention, without the team's intervention, and give feedback on. So if it's just working on their machine or just in a local environment, that's not good enough. You need to make sure that they're getting it done out there. And just help identify issues that might come up, things that they're not very good at or need some help with. Even if you can't be the one helping them, it's important that you let other people know.
So is a project manager also going to have a Gantt chart going on for these guys?
No, we don't do Gantt charts, no,
Okay.
in this environment.
You had critical path management up there, which is what
Yeah, I was steal some of this context from Cheryl. She's a highly trained project manager, so. And the other ones are too, Melanie and Bill, they might talk that way, but in our Agile environment, we're not doing the Gantt charts. We'll do mostly story mapping and use release planning from that.
The first project I worked on very seriously professionally had a Gantt chart that went ahead and extended.
Yeah, around the room.
It was a 5-year Gantt chart, and we made it.
You got it to work?
Got to the milestone after 5 years. A lot of modifications in the middle, but
Yeah.
it provably worked after 5 years worth of work. It's like,
That's probably a rarity in industry.
yeah, it was rare.
Tried to put me on a project with a 5-year timeline, I would run away screaming.
Yeah.
That's-
It's very special. Will allow me to just say that, and I can't say much more than that.
That's nice. We're in a 8-month period of time. That's what we get to work with. It's kind of nice. And it's great. I mean, I know you guys have volunteered to coach, but working with the team members, working with the students, it's a lot of great fun you can have. The big part of it is making sure you inject yourself onto the team. The team might not invite you or know how to utilize you, so you need to kind of get out there and be a little bit forceful sometimes to get involved. That's the big thing. So there's ways to do that. You can find a challenging problem for them to solve, kind of quickly. I know one of our coaches that we've had several years in Design Studio, he used to do that. He'd find something that they could kind of latch on and challenge the team right at the beginning, and that kind of does the team building, and they can solve it, and they can be successful and kind of grow as a group. If you could find something like a real challenge that they can do at the beginning of the project and get the team off on the right foot. Another thing you could do is learn what the individual objectives are for the team members. Some of these students are in here because they want to learn mobile. That's their primary objective, and then they get on a team and they don't tell that to their teammates, and so pretty soon they're just doing the back end stuff and not doing any of the mobile. So you have to kind of help them out and say, okay, speak up for yourself. You wanted to learn mobile, you can't do it unless you actually speak up, or help them get what they want out of this experience. Because it's usually more, it's a class for them, but they can gain things from it if you know what those are. You can help them achieve those objectives. You can be social with them. You can take them out to dinner, hang out with them, or go with their outings, plan activities, or help them plan activities, or they can do a little bit more social type stuff. You want to be forward with the team, tell them the truth, help them realize the risks or issues that they might face, that they might have trouble seeing or understanding, because they're a little too close to the project. And keep looking ahead. You have the experience, I mentioned this before, you can see kind of what's coming that the team doesn't have the experience to know, that's going to be a problem in a few weeks, and help them kind of mitigate those early. And get help if you need to. Like I said, you don't have to be the one to solve the problems for the team, but you can help them with whatever they need. We can get them whatever they need along the way. So here's kind of some things, rules that you can look at, and these kind of go together. So you want to contribute to the project as a mentor, advise them. You're not directing them or dictating to them or trying to control the project, so don't control the project. Insert yourself, as I mentioned before, and don't wait for them to ask you the questions or ask for help. Find ways that you can be part of the squad. If you don't, they'll think don't think that their silence means that they don't need help, because they probably do. I know they do. And then ask questions. Be a steward for the right ways to do things. Keep drilling them and challenging them along the way, and don't be afraid to call in for help, or have us kind of reiterate different practices with them if they need to learn a little bit more about it. So that's kind of the do's and don'ts of that coaching experience.
Are there any requirements on them giving updates on how many automated tests they have, like a test suite report that you used to do?
We had done that in the past. We haven't recently. We do what we call behaviors or activities that we're evaluating them on throughout the year, and testing is one of them. So as we are evaluating them at different points, so let's say it's release 2 or release 3, the team self-reports, what they're doing in terms of unit testing and how many tests they've created and all those things. But it isn't like a formal, like every week we tell us how many press testing it is. It's more on that release cycle basis.
Gotcha.
And we're changing that up a little bit. It'll probably be like a rolling behaviors this coming year, where we'll introduce some behaviors in release 1, and then release 2 we'll more formally evaluate them and then add some more behaviors in release 2, and then release 3 we'll more formally evaluate those and then add some more behaviors and kind of roll through, 12 to 18 different behaviors throughout the year. Probably about 15 behaviors.
So no firm metrics per team. You kind of adapt the metrics that you look at.
Yeah, we used to at a time where we'd have them tell us how many commits they had during that period of time, that release, and how many. This might have been when you were in there. How many commits they did, and who did how many commits, and every single person, and then how many unit tests they had, and how many stories they committed to, and what the story points were, and how many had changed or added in that. We don't currently do that in a formal standpoint like we had done a few years ago, but we are doing status reporting, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. Where on a regular basis we're getting the status from the students. We're also, as faculty and staff, reporting status back to them. So we're giving them our perspective of the project and telling them, that we think it's green or red or yellow or whatever it might be, and that's based off of theirs and why we think it's that way, to help them learn and adjust as they're going through it. So part of that status reporting, we'll have them tell us how many stories they're working on, how many stories are left for that release. A little bit more traditional agile metrics, so a burn down chart and stories left, stories complete. So I mentioned that we are grading these behaviors, so that's kind of where this comes in. We're looking at their project management technique, their agile pieces. We're looking at their behaviors in a development standpoint, so testing, continuous integration, telemetry, things like that we're looking for them to do some activities on and justify where they're doing them, what they're doing on those activities.
Are there lectures on each of these?
Yes, there had been. Some of them were limited more than others, but we're going to change the way we're doing lectures this year, and it's going to be a little bit more workshop based. The point is there that instead of me standing up in front of the room and telling them how to do story mapping, we'll do an activity where they can do story mapping for their project, and then we'll just guide them through the activity. So that way they're doing the work for their project instead of just sitting in class, because most of the time they'll just say, well, I know that already, even though they don't. But they say, oh, why are you standing up there? You could have told us that in 5 minutes, and it took you an hour, and I already know all of that. And then they never do it in their project. So we'll give them a chance to do it in their project, and then we'll kind of evaluate it as part of that class session in a working session.
I'm looking for a way to volunteer Doug to do a lecture on testing.
Oh, good.
Probably enjoy it, actually.
Yeah, he was going to help us out with Design Studio this year, but then he ended up realizing that he really didn't have the time for it. So the behaviors is one piece that we're looking at, and then I mentioned the status reporting is another thing. We'll do that on a weekly basis. They report the status to us. We report some status back to them, and kind of go back and forth and just make sure everybody's kind of on the same page as where we think the project is at. And it depends. We can maybe try to bring the coaches into the loop along the way there too. So it's it's a little bit subject to change on the dates, if it's be Monday or Tuesday or whatever it might be, I don't know, but that's kind of a weekly process that we do to keep everybody on the same page. Here's some of the challenges that that the coaches have, reported facing in the past. Staying up to speed, keeping up to speed on the project's always a challenge. Staying open and transparent. You don't want to have them feel like you're manipulating them or something like that, where they don't trust you. It's really all about trust. Building that trusting relationship. And the students are new to this, so they're going to be uncomfortable with different pieces of it. So you might want to challenge them or figure out how you can get them to help. And then coach them along the way. So if they're struggling getting the testing, help figure out how to get them testing more, or if they're struggling getting the code released, making sure that you're helping them figure out strategies to get it released, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah, a lot of team dynamics issues. That's a lot of what the coach is for. Because if you can spend a little bit more time, then obviously I can with the 5 or 6 or 7 teams that I'm going to be managing here in senior design, much less the 5 or 6 or 7 teams I'm going to be doing in design studio. I don't have the time with it, so you're gonna be able to spend the time and see that they're struggling with this student's not participating, or he's not communicating well, and you can bring those issues up or help them strategize through that. So I don't know, none of you have been coaches before, so we won't really have much for past perspectives. I can give you some if you want, but these are some of the questions that a lot of coaches have had in the past. And what we'll probably try to do as we get started this year, I'm going to try to utilize the coach channel. We'll create a channel in Slack that'll be for all the coaches, and that'll help if you want to get in touch with other coaches. But I'll try to use that, and I'll put periodic messages in there to remind you of the resource. I'll probably put in maybe some questions like this, and we can get some feedback from the other coaches. That way I can bring in some of those past perspectives for you guys and let you know how that goes. Answer some of those questions. Things like this is, we're going to track. We'll probably meet with you guys again sometime mid-year and see how things are going, see if there's ways that we can help the coaches and help you as a coach and make things work a little bit better. Keep you kind of in the loop. I'll share these slides with you. One thing I did want to mention before we're done here is parking. Parking is going to be free for you guys this year.
Thank you, Santi.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Santi.
I personally thanked him, even though I walked today.
Can you pay for my parking permit?
No, we can't. So if you don't work for the university or are affiliated, or you're not a student or a faculty or anything like that, then I can get you parking.
So this is different than just the validated?
Yes, this is a permit, an actual annual permit. And I was going to look up because I didn't actually have a chance. I can't give you one, Jeff. You can fill this out and apply for a permit, and you take it over to the parking office. And I think there is one here, checkbox for volunteer. I think you sign up then for a volunteer parking pass, and you go over there, and then there's certain I'm not sure how extensive the places are that you can park, but there's certain places that you can park, and you'll have your pass, whether it's a hang tag or a window sticker or whatever, and you can come in and park in those places throughout the year. So I'll have to get the detailed instructions yet, but I think you take that over to the parking office to get the permit, and I think that has to happen once Christy has sent your names over, maybe. So I'm not sure. I say it's free. It's free to you. I'm not sure if Christy's paying for it. I'm sure she is. I don't think parking.
No such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah. Parking in particular on campus is really a stickler. So I'll get you some more instructions, but these are the applications, and that way you'll be one step closer to getting your parking passes. There's meeting spaces. So I'm not sure where your teams will be meeting. You'll learn that as you go. Some will meet here in the Union, some will meet over in Avery or in Shore, some will meet in at the library, has a lot of good meeting spaces. So they'll meet in various places on campus to do their actual meetings, and then they'll have their team time, work time space. There's a few buildings that we use for that. What they asked about it earlier was Brace and the Immersion Media Center, Immersion Media Arts, and then Shore and Avery and Louise Pound. Pound Hall. Used to be CBA. So they'll have a variety of places. And then if you're here working with them for a period of time, you want to get on the guest's Wi-Fi. And so there's ways to do that as well. And I'll send these slides. You can sign up for the Wi-Fi while you're here on campus. I mentioned before the first 3 weeks. The one in particular I want to call out here is the sponsor rollout. You're welcome to come and see the sponsor rollout piece if you have time. This between 2 and 3:15 on Tuesday and Thursday of the first week of September, the 3rd and the 5th. And it's a good opportunity for you to meet more students, interact with them. I don't know. I'm not sure if we'll have your project identified yet, but potentially so. Then you'd meet with your sponsor. The team won't be known, but the sponsor will be known potentially.
So just a repeat on Tuesday, like Tuesday or Thursday, or?
We have 25 sponsors, so half of them will go on Tuesday and half of them will go on Thursday.
2 sessions.
Yep, and each one will present twice in each of those days. So no student can make every single sponsor's presentation, but they can make 6 or so of them on Tuesday and 6 or so of them on, so they can see 12 different projects out of the 25. They can see about half of them. And then, they'll know what the projects are, so they'll go to the half that they want to see, and then they'll make some decisions from that. Then they'll submit their preferences to us, and then we'll assign teams on the 10th. And that would be the email that'll say, here's your sponsor, here's your coach, here's your team, here's this, all the sponsor people. And everybody can kind of say, okay, here's everything you need to know about all the team members in play on this particular project. And that'll come from your project manager, so that way you already start to get familiar with, if it's Melanie or Bill or me, who's going to be the one that you come to with the questions.
Sure.
When does the team self-select the lead on their project?
It'll be that right after teams are assigned, they'll start creating their team times and they'll start selecting how they want. I don't want to rush them. Some of them will pick out their lead, in the first couple of days. I usually like to give them a week or so to make sure they're making a good choice. But
I was speaking with Everett Rhodes, and he said something that worked with them was meeting one-on-one with the lead.
Yeah, and he's a coach now for a couple of years in design studio. So those leads are known earlier, and they're not self-selected. They're a little bit more of a process to that.
Okay. I mean, is that something you'd recommend?
I would. I wouldn't neglect the team, but maybe add a little extra time with the team lead, because they're the ones that are going to need the most help. They're newest to that, and that's a leadership role that they might not be very good at.
Gotcha.
Like if you got somebody that's if you're technical, and you could meet with the development lead and really talk about what it means to be a development manager on a team, and how you do the code reviews, or how's things to make your code review process easier. If you promote standards forward or something, that way alleviates all the little comments that you might make on a code review. Things like that you can help them with. You can meet with them individually and help them better do their job. They're all new to it. They're all very green. Some of them are very bright and they'll be able to do a ton of stuff, but they just don't have the experience.
Do you teach focus code inspection so that you provide an area of focus for each of the different individuals?
We don't necessarily assign that, but some of the teams will do kind of subgroups and or specialties within their team. So they might assign somebody the front end, the design, the UI piece, They might assign somebody the back end, they might do something like that. And so that person is the one that they go to for those particular pieces. Some teams have done kind of 2 sub-teams. If they have a project that has a hardware piece and a software piece, they'll split into 2 sub-teams and maybe even do a development manager for each of them and kind of managing the 2 sub-teams almost separately. There's different ways. Depends on the project, on how they might structure themselves. I've seen different ways to do it. And occasionally they'll switch, leads, halfway through the year. In senior design, we'll have some people drop the class. We'll have some people, decide not to finish or have issues with something and need to switch teams. And so we'll do some team member changes occasionally.
Sure.
So it just depends.
So UML being used commonly anymore?
Some, they'll use it in conjunction with CSS and for the front end design, just some of the style sheets. I don't know how much it's a UML5, if anything. But there's all kinds of technologies. I don't know. It'd be hard pressed to say.
Automated test suite tools specific or any environment?
It depends on the team. Some of them will use some particular ones. We've had some teams use Selenium or other ones. A lot of them will use, JUnit or NUnit or whatever the unit testing frameworks are. And then there's some more kind of acceptance testing or feature testing suites I know they've used, and I can't remember. It's not, I think, fitness sometimes, but there's a different one that I wanted to say. I can't remember what the name is. I saw it used last year. Yeah. So it varies. And they'll use different continuous integration tools too. So we can use Travis CI, but there's some that'll use TeamCity or Jenkins or something like that. So, oops, that was the last. I did mention that the teams will be assigned on the 10th. So then we'll start doing workshops and getting them the understanding that they need to know along the way. We'll also have some group activities, do some cross-team stuff, special topics, that type of thing. I'll probably post the schedule for the class once we get there. We'll do a confidentiality agreement with you guys, and we make that project specific and year specific, and that's assuming that we don't do the pool thing. If we do the pool thing, then it'll just be across all of senior design. But generally, we try to make it sponsor specific, academic year specific, and that way there's no misconception on it. That's pretty standard. Are there other questions? Any questions? Remaining questions?
So I guess overall our role is advice, like you said, and it sounds like it's going to be a mix of technical and non-technical.
Yeah. And then we try to, I said we might try to get your preferences, but we try to match the coaches with where we think the need is going to be. So if we have a sponsor that we think, okay, this one's a new sponsor, we're not real sure how they're going to approach this, they seem to be a little bit, nitpicky or something, so we might put a coach on there that has more management experience and that can help them. Or if we have a remote team and we need somebody that has some experience with working remote employees, more of a management style. Or if we know this is a really tough technology, so we need a technical coach on there that can help them through some of those things. So we try to match the coach's strengths with the team's weaknesses or the project's potential risky areas, and try to match that up to get the most value out of you. Not that that always works, but we try to line it up where we can. But lately we've been trying to get you the projects you want to be on too. So if you have an interest in a particular area, you can submit your preferences and we can try to accommodate that. Go ahead.
You started to answer my next question, which was when and how are we assigned to a project?
Once we know the coaches, which I think my deadline there is like the 27th. Probably that week we'll go through the process of determining preferences and making sure we understand your skill set. We'll ask you probably for your bio and your technical or your areas of interest, and then and your preferences, and then we'll try to line you up with where we think the needs are, in hopes that we'll have it done before we do the rollout, which that way you can, if you come to the rollout, you could see which day your sponsor would be on and come to that day only, and maybe meet the sponsor a little bit more and talk with them already.
So is there any intellectual property recovery that you guys are going to go ahead and try and do on any of this?
All the IP goes to the sponsor.
Okay.
Is that your question? I don't know. None of it is retained by the university.
Yeah, that's basically it, because I could see the university potentially going ahead and getting some IP out of it, sponsor getting IP out of it, and then...
This all goes to the sponsor.
Okay. Does the sponsor have a formal, or is part of this process going ahead and examining the IP going to the sponsor so that they could go ahead and do a patent claim?
They can. They're meeting with the team on a regular basis. I'm not sure. They can go through the process, and we've done it a few times in Design Studio where they've submitted for patents and put the student teams on the patent.
Sure.
It's fairly rare. Some of our projects are with the university entities, different departments, or we do what we call faculty projects, which are from the computer science department. Obviously, the university and the faculty retain the IP in those cases, and sometimes there's some research papers out of it.
One of these project steps that I used to have to go through because I was responsible for that part of it.
Yeah. It rarely happens, and we work with the sponsor. We had one 2 years ago in senior design that we're trying to do a patent. But there's not a ton that we do with it. Again, the sponsor gets all the IP, so they can do what they want with it. They instructed us to make sure we didn't say certain things. They had to keep things confidential.
No, and then they also have to sign off for the property rights, et cetera, but they have to engage the patent attorney, which has never changed.
Right. Well, and the university has some patent attorneys, so it's a little bit easier there.
Yeah, that's true. Although it was costing us about $10,000 per claim to
Yeah.
go ahead and buy all the stuff.
Will tech stack be, if it's known at the time, will that be as part of the kind of project descriptions before preferences go out?
Yeah. It is always in Design Studio. I'm not sure if that's part of the short description she's put together in senior design. I know we have a short description, but I'm not sure if she included the tech stack. I can check on that. I know we do that in Design Studio, but I'm not sure if we do it here in senior design.
I can see how that'd be useful pairing up expertise.
Yes.
So.
Yep. Yeah, so if you're really good at .NET, then we highlight or point out the .NET projects, and maybe that would add some extra value on those. Or whatever it is, Python or Ruby or...
You need to go ahead and go just read a whole bunch of different things, but that's part of the whole thing. If I have a project to actually work on, I can learn people.
Yeah, it's fun working with the students. You should have fun with it, enjoy it. That's part of the deal. Make it an enjoyable and memorable experience for the students.